Welcome to Screen Quest, a podcast where a fellowship of film lovers and armchair movie experts plays film roulette. I'm one of your hosts, Chris Waterman, joined by my fellow party members, May Finch.
Hi, everyone.
And Will Rotondi.
Hey.
It is, of course, a regular episode again this week. We will be talking about Gone with the Wind, the 1939 classic starring, oh my God, my brain just completely blanked out. Vivian Leigh and Clark Gable. Wow. Can you tell it's Sunday? And of course, we'll be drawing a side quest. But first, I wanted to chat with you all about the new Super Mario Brothers trailer, which just dropped this week. Got a much better idea of, I think, tonally what the film will be like, and we got to hear a lot of voices that we didn't in the last trailer. So what did you think of the trailer? It's going to be a day one watch for you. Start with May.
I'll watch it when it comes to streaming.
Oh,
it looks cute. It just, with this trailer, it does seem pretty clear that they're kind of making like a Marvel style superhero movie out of it, and like that has me slightly less excited. But it does look cute, and I did like the scene. I mean, I like seeing in 3D like familiar platforms from the games, like the bridge with the fish jumping over it.
absolutely.
That was great. But yeah, we'll see. I'll see what my friends say when it comes out, but I will probably wait for streaming. What about you, Will?
I'll report back.
You're gonna have to tell me too, Chris. So don't get me wrong, like I am looking forward to it. I'm not nearly as like up in arms as I know some people are about some of the voice casting. But I do think I think it'll be entertaining, if nothing else. I think most animated films at least have some sort of charm to them, and I feel like Mario probably will. So I hope that it will. So generally speaking, yeah, streaming for me too, but still excited just to see what they want to come up with. So.
Yeah, I'm very excited about this. I've been a Mario kid since I was probably 4, like back in the NES days. So
oh yeah,
old school. I think like just it's all the little details. So yeah, it does feel a little Marvel-y. I don't know, if they're gonna go like the Smash Brothers like route or something like that, where they're gonna pull in characters from other universes in the future. But I love the attention to detail. The Mario Kart sequence in the trailer is just phenomenal. And I think most of the voice casting is great. Like even before I've seen a lot. Like so Jack Black as Bowser is just like that's inspired
That's the best
casting.
one.
Charlie Day as Luigi, also a really good choice in my opinion. I'm still not 100% sold one way or the other on Chris Pratt. Not the biggest Chris Pratt fan, if I'm being honest. But hope he does well. But I do think like the visually and like tonally they nailed it. So maybe the lesson here is that you should do animated adaptations of video games, and that's where you'll be successful. Although we did get another trailer, which I did not have you guys watch, for The Last of Us, which debuts next month on HBO Max. And I am incredibly excited about that.
I'm stoked. Yeah.
That is my favorite video game story of all time. And I think if you can't nail it with that one, like maybe it's just not in the cards for video game adaptations, but it's probably the most cinematic video game ever, in terms of story. So have you've played Last of Us, Will?
I have. I'd actually argue Horizon Zero Dawn, baby. But yeah, Last of Us is by far, I mean, it's a great game, and it's got an amazing story and a lot of heart behind it. And I am excited to see how it's going to be. Like some of the actors that they got for those characters, I am so stoked to see how it's going to translate to a series on HBO. And I feel like HBO is going to do it well. Some people might just try to do it for the cash grab, but they tend to do pretty well with for the most part. Yeah, I know it's arguable on that too, but I feel like for the most part, they go for stuff that has good content.
Do you think it's something that'll like make sense to someone who hasn't played the game, or should I quickly play through the game before it comes out?
It's an adaptation, and it looks very faithful. I think that because Marianne asked me the same question, I think that you would be just fine, like watching the show. Like it seems to kind of follow beat for beat from what I can tell. Very excited because they had the original composer, like the music is just so fabulous.
Yeah.
I think he's Spanish, like although he may be from a different Latin country, but I feel like he is Spanish. There's a lot of Spanish like guitar, and just it's very melancholy. So they brought him for the show, which I think was like a very smart choice. And then also Neil Druckmann from the game, the director of the game, was heavily involved in the show and directed a couple episodes as well. So again, good
Awesome.
fighting chance to be a solid thing. But I agree with you on the casting. Like I think Pedro Pascal as Joel, excuse me, is like it's a great choice. And I'm looking forward to crying my eyes out probably at least like 50% of the time if it's anything like the game. So
That's what I'm saying. Like some of those surprises, man. Like if it's that, I would almost argue, May, like don't play the game beforehand. Like watch the series first, because I mean, if it's pretty much mirroring how the story goes in the game, there'll be a couple of moments that like really surprised me. I think surprised everybody, truthfully. So
I won't spoil myself then.
don't do it.
yeah,
I don't know if there's
agree.
anything about a dog, but anything else, don't.
So looking forward to those for very different reasons. I urge you to maybe watch the trailer for The Last of Us if that sounds interesting. But yeah, let's have us a side quest here, shall we?
Yes, please.
I am shuffling away, and here we go. Ooh, it's a
I'm sorry,
neuralizer.
you have to say it like Mario.
I'm a shuffling. Wahoo! Oh man. So it's a neuralizer. This is where we're going to erase the movie from our brain and experience it for the first time. For me, it's a very easy pick. It is The Usual Suspects, which is I know a little complicated now. I feel like anything with Kevin Spacey is a little bit tougher to watch than it used to be, unfortunately. But that being said, I think this has maybe one of the greatest film twists like of all time. And subsequent viewings are really only enjoyable to either see somebody else experience it for the first time and put it all together, or like to maybe look for clues and things like that. But it's been picked apart, so I think that's a very easy choice for me, and I don't want to spoil the twist because this movie deserves to be experienced like just blind, but it's significant, and it's one of those ones that like you immediately want to start it back up because you're like, oh man, like how obvious was this like the whole time. Who has seen this? Raise your hand if you have on the pod. Will, you've seen it? Okay.
It's like,
saw
which
nothing
you have
for
to
a
hold on.
while.
It's like it flips. Yeah, sorry.
Would
Sorry,
you
Scarlett.
agree?
I'm gonna put my hand up in front of your face here for a second. But yeah, yes, I have. I liked it too. It was a lot of fun. It's fun because of the characters in it too. Like not just the actors who play them, the characters that they are, and just sort of like trying to piece together this whodunit about what had happened. And yeah, it's just fun, in my opinion, to watch it just for that. So
great cast. We got, in addition to Kevin Spacey, there's Gabriel Byrne, Stephen Baldwin, I believe, Benicio del Toro, Kevin Pollak, and am I missing anybody else? I'm sure I am somewhere, but those are the big principals I remember. Good supporting cast too. I forget the guy that plays Agent Couillon that does like the interrogating, but the structure of the film is that they bring Kevin Spacey into a police station, and something has gone
where he should be.
yeah, he's right there, right at home.
Noise.
And he is being interrogated about something that went terribly wrong the night before. There's an explosion on a ship and a lot of dead bodies, and he starts to spin a yarn about how this sort of heist came together and where it all went wrong. And that's kind of the setup. And the lineup scene is a very famous where they're all like in the lineup in the police station and they're just goofing off, and apparently a lot of that was improvised and sort of just like the actors having a good time, and they kept it in. So highly recommend that. If you like suspense thrillers, give it a shot.
I'll add it to my list.
Yeah. All right. Well, since Will's pick was this week, and again, that's Gone with the Wind from 1939, I'm going to turn it over to him to guide us through the discussion. So take it away,
Oh
Will.
man. Yep, here we go, baby. Gone with the Wind. It's one of those films that I had always sort of thought in the back burner, like I need to watch this. Kind of like Godfather. Like it's built up as this classic that if you love film or if you love cinema and you wanna like watch some of the big ones throughout history, it was like this had to be a classic to add to it. And I just never got around to it. And so it was nice to have this as an excuse to throw it out there and to see what I thought. And it was definitely an interesting ride. But I will say, just to kind of recap what the film is about, it's the story of Scarlett O'Hara, played by Vivian Leigh, who is the daughter of a Georgia plantation owner who deals with the effects of the Civil War. So around the 1800s, like 1861 to 65, and then the Reconstruction era after that, from 65 to 77. And I think when the novel starts, like the book that the film's based on, I think Scarlett's supposed to be around 16 years old when we were first introduced to her. And we were kind of made aware that she is infatuated with this guy, Ashley Wilkes, who's played by, I want to say it is, oh, please hold. See, now I'm forgetting names. Is that Leslie Howard, I think?
Yes.
And so Ashley is going to marry Melanie Hamilton, played by Olivia gosh, I am so sorry. I'm going to be tripping over names. De Havilland?
Yeah.
Butchering everyone's name as we go, in keeping. Olivia de Havilland, who is probably the nicest character in this entire film. But from there, we see that Scarlett, who was interested in Ashley, just sort of starts to marry other men out of spite, in order to kind of like sort of get back at other people. She's just like, I can't have what I want, so I'm just gonna do stuff to like mess with other people's lives. So she ends up marrying two other guys. One who dies during the Civil War, another one who dies in a conflict after that. Before she eventually marries Rhett Butler, who is played by Clark Gable, who is like, if you hear of Gone with the Wind, he's the other guy that you always hear about. Who is this sort of Han Solo character. I'll put it that way, just because having seen Star Wars before this, I'm like, this is where they must have gotten this character from. This feels like that archetype of this sort of schmoozy, flirty, but also negging guy who just likes to go around and have a good time. He's not really affiliated with anybody. He'll do whatever seems like the right thing to do for his own self-interest at the time, which kind of mirrors Scarlett and what she tries to do. So they're kind of, in some ways, just they're so similar that when they try to get together, obviously it's more of a train wreck than anything else. Because they start out, they get married, seems like things are going to go well, and then it's just like the most toxic relationship I have ever seen in film, maybe on par with like Citizen Kane, where it's just nothing is going well. There's just tragedy that happens after that. Becoming rich doesn't do enough for them. It's more just like the petty issues that come up. Their child dies from falling off a horse, and then just a whole lot of like created drama between them, because that is just who they are. And yeah, and then it ends with the classic line where after an argument, Rhett Butler's like, I'm out and I don't give a damn what you do with your life, Scarlett, and he just disappears into the mist. And we also get like this feeling like, okay, so now Scarlett's unhappy again, and how is this going to turn around? And then it's like the film ends on this very surprising, like uplifting feeling of like, sort of reiterated throughout the course of the narrative, which is that, whatever happens to you, as long as you got land, as long as you got your home in the land that you grew up on, then that's all that really matters, right? And she gets really excited by that idea of staying at home at Tara in Georgia, and yeah, and that's she seems very excited about that, and she thinks, even to the extent of thinking, I'll go back home and then I'll figure out how I can get Rhett back. And I'm like, what a way to end this film, man. Like, she is clearly very excited. And it's like this uplifting feeling, not just in her expression, but like the music is rising. And it's this whole idea about, I guess, this love of the land that was very much the popular view, I guess, for the novel, perhaps. And I apologize, I haven't read the novel. I probably need to give it justice, but for the idea of what this film represented. So that's pretty much for me where we ended up. But I will be very interested to hear your thoughts about general impressions. Chris, I know you'd said you'd seen this before, so May, I got to turn it over to you first. I want to get your feedback, see what you thought after watching this for the first time.
Yeah, I didn't like it. Uh, lots of things I didn't like about it. I do think Scarlett's an interesting character in that she is in some ways painted as kind of a femme fatale, but also as like being horribly naive when it comes to romance. And that's kind of an interesting archetype. I don't think is like too often repeated. But she's also insufferable as a result.
Yeah, it's true. It's like watching film noir almost in some respects, which is like the expressions that she has and kind of the conniving behavior that she's got. Yeah, that's pretty good. I like that.
Yeah, so that was interesting. I agree with what you said about her relationship with Rhett just being like insanely toxic. And it reminds me of a lot of the like more modern shows you see of just kind of like shows like You're the Worst, where it's just like really focusing on a cast of all like terrible people and just like what they're doing to each other. This feels a lot like that.
Mhm.
With the exception of I guess it was Melly, who is like or Melanie, who's the one saintly character.
Gosh, man, yeah, talk about like always being the voice of reason for the most part, like with everything, and just always looking for the good in people.
Yeah, I think she's
Amazing.
kind of like
Incredibly tolerant.
right. I think she's like supposed to be like the moral compass of the film, I guess. I
Mhm.
don't know. But yeah, it was long, didn't love it. We were talking off Mike about on HBO there's like a nice little kind of preface to the movie that contextualizes it with things like this some very racist depictions of enslaved people and servants in the movie, and the actors and actresses that played them weren't like allowed to sit in like the same awards tables and stuff like that because of racism and other important context, which yeah just added to the discomfort of the film for me.
Yeah, understandable. And important shout out to it was Hattie McDaniel, right? It was who played, was it Mammy was the
Mm-hmm.
name of the, and she was, man, she was awesome. What a
Right.
like what a great actor. And yeah, to have her not be allowed to sit at their table. If you read more about like when they were, I guess because it was at the awards, or was it after the awards
She
where
was
they
not
didn't let
permitted
her?
to attend the premiere. I was pleased to see that Clark Gable was not going to attend the premiere either in protest, and was
Mhm.
then convinced by her to do it. Like she was like, "No, you should go," but he was going to, in a show of solidarity, not go to the premiere, which was in Georgia. But yes, at the award show, she was attended to permit, but was stuffed in a corner, basically, table, along with her agent, who was a white man. But yep.
So yeah, definitely interesting in terms of how things were back then well, I guess both for the novel and what was excluded from the film, which we can talk about because there is a lot more like not just derogatory language that got excluded from Gone with the Wind as a film versus the novel, but also sort of sidestepping the KKK that features in the book. And I think probably just a lot of other things that Hollywood at the time was trying to, I don't know. It's weird because you watch the film and it feels like it's trying to idolize the South in a lot of ways still. And so it's sort of like trying to appease people that I guess liked the book without completely alienating everybody. But at the same time, there's still I mean, it was by far no means perfect. And by today's standards, there's so much that is glaringly wrong that you watch in that film. But yeah, that's a good point, and I'm glad that HBO added in the little introduction to it, because I think that is important to acknowledge that this is a piece of history in terms of its entertainment value at the time, but also the reasons why it was the way it was when it came out.
High school, and I had a girl over, so I'm not really sure how much of this like I really paid attention to, if I'm being honest. Like a
Nice.
lot of this was like kind of like seeing it for the first time. It could also be because, that would have been like probably 20 years ago. So I don't know, maybe not. But that being said, there's a lot to grapple with this movie. I think in a lot of ways, this film is extraordinary. It's got amazing use of color, like really early use of color. We're a couple years before the Casablanca or Citizen Kane, and the scope of the film, the sets, some of the location shooting, costume design, all that stuff is fabulous. And I think in a lot of ways, many of the characters are more complex than I would have probably thought for a film that came out this early. The structure of the film, in particular the ending, seems very anti-Hollywood in a lot of ways as well to me. But it is hard to overlook, some of the things that happen around the production and, subsequent release, and some of the things that are depicted. And I don't think those things should be overlooked. So it's a movie that I am really, really fascinated by. And I'm glad that it exists for people to kind of watch and talk about. But I think probably, if I had to guess, I think that like subsequently this film, like as time goes on, is going to be more of an interesting conversation piece around how things have evolved, right? Like within the Hollywood studio system, and not necessarily a cautionary tale, but like kind of a bit of an embarrassing look back at like what Hollywood practices used to be. So I don't think those things should be overlooked or ignored, but they certainly make it a more interesting conversation that, like, where you can't just sort of go, well, like I'm going to like focus on just solely on the characters and the plot. I think those two things are so married to one another that I don't know, I found myself very conflicted, because I think that in a lot of ways it is a very brilliant piece of filmmaking, but there was a lot of things that just made me kind of grit my teeth a little bit and wince a little bit. So I feel very conflicted. I don't know. Does that make sense? Hopefully I'm making sense, but
I
felt
can
very
relate.
conflicted.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, don't worry,
Um,
man. I think, yeah. Oh, you were
the
going to say something else?
performances are
Yeah.
brilliant too in the movie. I think like almost all around. Like, and I was sad to hear that Leslie Howard like died tragically, like in a his plane was shot down while he was promoting the British war effort in World War II, like pretty shortly after this. Just like reading the whole thing was like a very tragic thing. So it's one of those things that made me sad while I was watching it too, because it's like, why didn't I ever see this guy again? He's awesome as Ashley Wilkes in a lot of ways. And I was like, oh well, that sucks.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's pretty much in a nutshell how I felt about it. Just very conflicted. I see the significance certainly in like why it's endured, but yeah, there you are.
I was actually trying to find out. So for me, going into this the first time blind, like, or I guess not necessarily blind, but clearly very naive myself about what this film was about. I came out of it wondering, like, are there people that, for the people that do like this, like liked the book, because it sold like millions of copies when it came out, and people were ecstatic when this film was made, and people talk about like, oh, Gone with the Wind, this epic love story, and I'm like, okay, so it's a love story during the Civil War, gotcha, okay. And then I watched it, and just based on the films that we've watched together, I was like, so this is like all about Eve meets like Han Solo. This is very strange to me. Like, this is not what I expected. And my wife and I watched it together, and I love how like like before we recorded this, when we were all sort of watching it on our own, that Chris made some comment about, when he's watching it with his wife and I'm watching it with mine, and we're all having like the same, or at least his wife, myself, my wife, we're all having like the same reaction to this film. Like, what is going on? And holy shit, Scarlett, you are so manipulative. So on the one hand, it was entertaining for that alone, like just the reaction of not knowing what you're getting into, and you're just like, this is a train wreck, but I am fascinated to see how this train wreck is going to finish. And that's just sort of that was how I felt through most of it. I will say that for something that is as long as it is, because it's close to like 4 hours, I think, depending on which version you watch, with or without the intermission and the musical interlude and all that, if for being that long, I mean, in some places it can drag, but there's usually always something going on. Like, it's not very, there's not very long takes or very like moments where there's not dialogue unless the music is swelling and there's like a big panning shot, you know. So something is still, there's always something to the plot that's going. But I agree that depending on how you feel about the subject matter and depending on how you feel about the characters, you may find it to be a fascinating train wreck, or you may just find it to be like poking a needle in your eye, like watching some of this stuff going on. So but yeah, I will say though, the cinematography for me, I loved it. I think visually, like I love all the cool special effects from back in the day, like the matte paintings to try and give like depth and to do design work for things you couldn't do. You know, you couldn't obviously film because it didn't exist, or it was just too expensive to build a set that large. Or like when the town is burning or the city's burning and everyone is trying to get out and there's all these flames in the background and just the design work there. And it's very beautiful and harrowing and almost surreal in some ways, with all the coloration that they do. And so that to me, I thought was the coolest aspect of going back and watching this. And more to the point, like what Chris, you were saying about how this came out before like some other classics like Citizen Kane and like Casablanca, where it was still black and white. And so yeah, just the money that was pumped into the film around that day, which was like what, 5-6 million, which by today's standards is like 66 million or something, I think I read. So it's like was like this massive budget and was in production for so long trying to find, you know, the right actors they wanted, or at least for the part of for Scarlett's character. And yeah, so there's just, it's amazing almost in itself just how massive it was back when you had to get so many extras and so many practical effects to use. And yet at the same time, also a great way to have conversations about social issues. So yeah, I think actually with that in mind, it's kind of a nice little segue into the first question I'd like to ask you guys about. But are there any other thoughts that came up, things you'd like to add before we do?
Just worth noting that David O. Selznick was like a notorious control freak. I think he fired 2 directors prior to the one that got screen credit for this. And if you kind of, you know, from like an academic perspective and like I guess biographical, if you go back and kind of read a lot of primary accounts, for all intents and purposes, this is his movie. Like, you know, I mean, he was on set like daily, and had just a large hand in everything. I think that's a very interesting, there's not a lot of producers like that are that involved, and he's one of the more interesting personalities in Hollywood history. Famously courted and convinced Alfred Hitchcock to come to the United States, much to Hitchcock's eventual like just resentment, because he locked him into a 4-picture deal and kind of loaned him out to other studios to get around the, you know, the contract and things like that. But I urge you, if you're interested in old Hollywood history, David O. Selznick's one of the most interesting people. Not always the most pleasant, but had a very large hand in what you think of as sort of classic Hollywood. But now that's the only thing I wanted to add. I think it's a interesting little sidebar of just the production history, you know, and just how many directors and things they went through to really get this thing made, you know.
Well, on that note of questionable tactics on how to get what you want out of film, let's talk about questionable characters. So I think that, and I apologize, you might hear some background noise here for just a second. There's an airplane flying overhead, but okay, I think we're good now. So I guess it's worth like talking about the main characters in the film, right? So talking about Scarlett, talking about Rhett, and just the toxic relationship. Like I'd like to hear a little bit more sort of things that stood out to you in terms of whether we're talking like social behavior or sexual relationships that are sort of subtly or not so subtly hinted at in the film about what happens, equality, politics, war, just anything that sort of stood out to you in terms of just like the really weird relationship that Scarlett and Rhett seem to have throughout the film. They're the 2 that I thought of the most when I was thinking about just what to talk about. But if there are other characters that you think are better to sort of discuss things that stood out to you, I am absolutely down to hear about it too. But Chris, I'll turn it back over to you first. If it's Scarlett and Rhett, or if there's any other relationships that seem to be of particular interest to you?
Yeah, so I actually throughout most of the film kind of enjoyed some of their banter, and up until one very specific scene, I really liked Rhett as a character. Then something happens like kind of late in the film that where it was just like I was completely stunned by, but I'm sure we'll talk about that. But yeah, he's kind of like a call it like you see it, and seems to balk at the idea of like war in terms of like the the real human cost and that kind of stuff. So I found him to be very interesting in that way, and then contrasted with Scarlett for most of the film, where she's very selfish and self-centered and comes very close. I thought maybe she was going to get a redemption arc like during the reconstruction bit where she's like working the farm and holding stuff together. I was like, oh, okay, so this is going to be like her trajectory towards redemption, right? Like, now that's not what happens at all. So then when the two of them are finally together, I don't know, man. I found the relationship to be frustrating, which I suppose is kind of the point for a lot of it. Toxic's definitely a great word to use for a number of reasons. And I think I was probably most surprised by the tragic element of it. Not, and by like tragic, I don't mean like the relationship failing, but sort of the cost of like the loss of both an unborn child, and then the child that dies in the accident with the horse. And sort of wondering like, hey, had that child and Rhett stayed in London, would there have been just more happiness all around? He seems to be a pretty happy, like, doting father. That kind of surprised me too. Seemed like an interesting, like, for the time, like, gender role reversal a little bit. Like, you always hear about like the absentee father and that kind of stuff. So all that stuff I found very surprising. Despite doing some really horrible shit, I was kind of with him when he bounces at the end. I was like, I think this is the best for all involved. Like, you gotta call it. I found it incredibly frustrating that she has this 11th hour revelation that like, this whole entire movie in my whole life, I didn't actually love Ashley. I loved Rhett, and that's I don't feel like that moment, or at least that revelation for her, was earned in my opinion. Where it was like, this is not, you've not been building to this, like, that I can see. But I was 100% on his side when he left, even if he's not by all means like a perfect or necessarily likable character at that point. But yeah, that's my take. I really hope so. Something Marianne asked me, she's like, did people view this as like the ideal romance, like, when this movie came out? And I was like, it's always been touted as that. In fact, the scene, I might as well kind of touch on it, where he's carrying up this, I always saw that clip, and I thought it was like, oh, he's sweeping her off her feet. It's like, no, he's gonna go rape her. Like, that's what that's all about.
Yeah.
And I found it quite shocking. I was like, oh fuck, this is not at all the context of the scene that I thought it was gonna be. But I digress. So, like everything with this movie, very complicated. I had a lot of mixed feelings. So I'll leave it there.
I'll jump off from there for my take. I think part of the reason their relationship is confusing in a lot of ways, at least to a modern audience, is there was more of a like need for a woman in a relationship to like say no and like deny pleasure and like that kind of thing, like in that time period, which is the only excuse I can make for the fact that that was viewed as like romantic. I think that they are both terrible people, and I think that's kind of why, again, people can kind of rationalize their relationship. I don't know. I come down harder on Rhett than on Scarlett, because at least Rhett always knows Scarlett's deal. Like, he goes in knowing that she's in love with another man. Whereas with Rhett, he like leaves her in the worst situations. For instance, when she's in that carriage with a dying pregnant lady, a baby, and her servant, and he just
Off
suddenly
to
is
join
like
the army.
like, what the hell? You couldn't have like gotten them safely home first, which like took a day, right? Like that wasn't a huge delay.
Took a day and the horse died.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Oh, that
Yeah.
scene was wild. Smack. Whoop. The horse is dead. It's like, what?
I guess you have food now. But yeah, jeez. Like,
Um.
damn, dude.
So yeah, I started hating Rhett after that scene. Also, just because of like the weird moment where he's like forcing himself on her before she goes and trying to say all this like cliche romantic stuff when she's like, "Just get off of me. I'm mad at you for leaving us and abandoning us in this moment." And he's trying to make it like a romantic thing, and it's weird. I don't like it. So yeah, I hated Rhett from there, and I think Scarlett's just a mess and very selfish. And I do think her 11th hour kind of realization is a defense mechanism because her part of the reason I think she kept that candle burning for so long for Ashley was because he never said that he was like absolutely not interested in her. He kind of led her along the whole time.
Mhm.
So it wasn't until that moment that he was like, "No, I loved my wife, not you." So as bonkers as it sounds, I do think it took him actually like explicitly saying that for her to realize it and get it, which is embarrassing for her. So then she has to be like, "Oh, well, I never really loved him either."
I do love the zinger of it's always nice when you have the first wife's permission. Like,
Oh,
anyway.
Oh God.
yep. Oh man.
But yeah, so I don't think it's actually a realization on her part. I just think she's saving face after finally having that candle snuffed out.
Yeah, I think for me watching it, it was the hard part of like, because I think at first you are supposed to like Rhett. He seems to be the one guy who has, I mean, he's joking and well spirited and kind of says probably what a lot of people would have thought, like, don't go to war, it's just going to be a problem. And then he just, yeah, progressively becomes more of an asshole, or at least is revealed to be more of one
And
throughout the
seems
film.
and seems kind of like the most inconsistent character wise. Because he
Mhm.
does have those weird cheesy lines occasionally after being a very like bitter, witty person for most of the film. And so like those rare scenes where he is like just spouting off all this romantic gibberish, it's like very strange.
Yeah, I don't trust him. Like he's very contradictory. On the one hand,
Yeah.
he'll say one thing, like, "Oh, I'm not a marrying man," and then by the end, he wants to marry her. So it's like he doesn't say what he really means about certain things, and then you can't really trust him when he says stuff about others. Like, I don't know, he seems very inconsistent, like you said, and then he also seems to be very contradictory later. Like, oh, he didn't want to fight before, but now he wants to go fight just randomly. I'm gonna go join the army, and also good luck, Scarlett. It's been fun, and one day you'll love me and we'll get together. And so it's like, for all of his supposed, like, his image of this self-assuredness and this jovial nature, like, he's also like very just possessive and very controlling in his own way, where he just thinks that things will just go his way, and if it's not going his way, he's just going to go someplace else to get what he wants. So, and I like I don't know. I feel like that sort of built up to where he is very physically abusive to Scarlett later. Although I would say Scarlett is not to the same extent that Red is, but she is also very abusive to other characters in terms of just slapping them when she wants to. But that's the only thing that I'll say about her.
And
Um,
verbal abuse, especially with I think it was Prissy.
oh
Just
yeah,
constantly threatening to like beat her or send her south, which is a terrible euphemism.
yeah. And that is true. I'm glad you brought that up, and I apologize for forgetting about mentioning that. Like, just like grabbing her wrist and yanking her around up the staircase. Yeah, when she was mad that she wouldn't find a doctor. For Melanie, who was attempting to not die while having a baby. So, um, yeah, that, and I think that was mostly it. I didn't trust Rhett because he seemed like he was a nice face when there was something he could get out of it. And he even admits that too. He doesn't give anything without expecting something in return. And I thought, I believe you in that. I believe that is your tell in that. Whereas I don't think Scarlett ever, I think for Scarlett, she just was never happy with what she had. She always wanted what she couldn't have. And so that was sort of the drive for her to continue to want Ashley. you see the disrepair of everything after the war, and so she wants to go back to what she used to have, which was her home, and everything that's driven towards making enough money to go back and revitalize Terra. And so, yeah, I think she was never really happy, which she thought would make her happy never made her happy for the long term. And then she always wanted something that she couldn't have. What a rough way to go. I was actually just unrelated, but sort of off of that too. I was really surprised by some of the stuff that was included in this film that, I know that it was known for its like use of the word damn when Clark Gable gives that line about, frankly, I don't give a damn. At the end of the film, that being like a big deal to use that word with the Hays Code. But I was surprised with some of the other stuff that shows up in this film, like a Union soldier gets shot in the face. You've got, the very strongly implied rape scene. You've got followed very strangely by Scarlett's character, who seems happy after the fact. So that was like a whole something else to unpack from that.
Yeah, that I think that's probably why it got on screen, is because they did that to make it seem okay.
Yeah, gloss over the fact that was not consensual. Yeah.
Death of a child's pretty rare to see too at a film.
Like to see it on screen.
Time. Yeah.
To see her fly off the horse and like get hit on the jump, and yeah, that was crazy. So I think for some of that, and even some of the war wounds, I mean, not graphic to some degree, but implying that some dude's going to get his leg cut off, and just the whole scene, like they pan out in that big scene where all those soldiers are laid out in the field, or not the field rather, but in downtown. And I thought I'm surprised that made it in. So
long after we decided that we hated Scarlett, one of the biggest guffaws from Marianne and I was when they're trying to evacuate, and there's just a procession of like really fucked up, like injured soldiers, and Scarlett's like, oh, I wish they would hurry. Like they're missing limbs, and Marianne and I were like, that's just her in a nutshell, isn't it? Like it's just like, oh, wish she would hurry. Like, yeah. Oh my god.
Yeah. Everybody's in my way. I will say too, I feel like the moment, Chris, you were talking about how you felt like Scarlett would have her redemption arc in the Reconstruction era part afterwards. And I don't know, like she did say something like when she's having her moment where she's like, no matter what happens, I'm never gonna, like, was it be poor again or be without food or something? So just like that was like her goal. And I thought, so you're not really going to be nicer, right? You're just going to be more manipulative to get what you want. So I don't know. That was sort of, I was hoping she would be better. And I thought with Melanie and that interaction, she might be, but I guess I wasn't so surprised. I just felt bad for her that she didn't change, that she just kept sort of clinging on to that the rest of her life.
And everybody's so reverential towards her too. They're like, can't be mean to Scarlett. She did all this good stuff for us. And it's like, yeah, I mean, but it wasn't entirely selfless, was it? Like,
yeah, she helped Melanie with that baby reluctantly that one time, and they got her in. They got her in the door.
She does take people into her home, but like, it's always like some sort of like hustle, though. You know what I mean? Like once she's settled in, there's like the next thing she's on to.
Yeah.
I wish the tax man had taken her land. Like, give her the books. Like,
I learned from this film why Southerners hate taxes so much. That was very well established. I learned something, so I get it now. That's why you hate liberals. Okay, thanks. Oh man.
I apologize if you have like this as its own question, but I do love Belle Watling as a foil to Scarlett. I also think it's very interesting they have someone who, like, I think she's painted as like a madame or something, right? Like,
yeah.
But she's painted as being kind of like the moral opposite to Scarlett, which is cool, actually. I feel like that's also something that wouldn't usually get on film in that era.
So it actually is a bit of a trope. The hooker with the heart of gold is like probably the expression you've heard. Dates back to like westerns of like the 30s, especially, kind of showing that like
I didn't realize it was that old.
Yeah, no, I like it. The one that comes to mind is Stagecoach, like where like you have all these great archetypes, but in other words, sort of the profession doesn't dictate the moral compass, but it is a progressive view, and it is surprising still that that would even be a trope in the 30s. And I think she's an amazing
Especially in
character.
this film.
Yeah.
But God bless Melanie for taking her money. Nobody else would be nice to her except for Rhett, or guys that wanted something, obviously. But
yeah,
man, I loved that interaction actually between Melanie and Belle. I think that was probably one of just Melanie in general. Like, I mean, I know in some ways she could be more assertive with certain things, and that might be the downside to that character. But like, I guess the tolerance, I think, was what Chris was saying before. It's just like she'll be friendly to anybody, and she'll try to do the nice thing for everybody. But I think with the one part that I thought, like the one scene that really stood out to me was actually the one where the image that I've got up on, where Scarlett's wearing the red dress that Rhett tells her she needs to wear because he thinks that she's going to get outed by the rest of the group at Ashley's birthday party for trying to basically throw herself at Ashley, or for them that they were supposedly involved. The word had gotten around, and they'd seen them other people had seen both Scarlett and Ashley together and had assumed there was an affair going on there. And and Rhett's just ready because he's so jealous about it. He's like, he was just ready to have Scarlett get, punished for this and dressed her up. And I'm thinking, hey, this is like Scarlet Letter, and then also when Melanie comes up and the expression on her face and the words that she uses when she just like guides Scarlett through and just very diplomatically like has her integrated to the group. And I'm like, damn, Melanie is awesome. So
her death scene actually got to me, like when she that was probably some of the most genuine like emotion that like I feel like carried through and translated well still to now, where it was like, this is actually quite touching.
I sort of had mentioned the cinematography because that was something that I did want to talk about a bit more, but then it has integrated into our discussion already. I guess any other thoughts about the cinematography that might have stood out to you, whether it's like the matte paintings, the fact that this is a film that's in color, and how that would have been like, how would that have been different had they not decided to go that route, if they tried to be like a lot of the other films in the day and do black and white, and if that would have had any effects, or just the sheer scale of it, like the 900 some extras that you saw for all the wounded war guys, and they use like something like 1,000 dummies along with the 900 extras. So some guys are out there just like using practical effects to kind of like jury rig it so that the dummies are moving with them. So, which I thought was incredible. And I was so fascinated by the long panning shot, I didn't even look that closely to see if I could see anything like that. So I thought it was all extras. So, but yeah, any other sort of aspects from the cinematography that really stood out to either of you? And May, I can toss it over to you first if you'd like.
If it was black and white, I don't think she would have been named Scarlet.
Nice.
I think they really like used the fact that they had color to full advantage, especially with that outfit she's in behind you, Will, the red dress. And I think that it helped with the nostalgia shots they have of the South, and just kind of like showing the scenery and like how green the plants are and blue the sky is, and stuff like that. So I do think it's a movie that probably wouldn't have been as like popular and groundbreaking if it hadn't been in color. I think that serviced the movie quite a bit. I didn't love a lot of the like scene editing personally. If we're throwing that in with cinematography, it just like a lot of things just like seemed very abrupt, and there were some like great panning shots like you mentioned with the soldiers, but there are others that were just like kind of abrupt and chaotic and didn't really give scenes time to breathe, especially when a bunch of like traumatic stuff started happening towards the end, and it was just like death after death after death. It just felt like there was a huge pacing shift that I didn't like.
I wonder if in some respects, like, and Chris, you might speak to this better than me. I know that they like it was, so the novel itself is like enormous, and I think that some of the initial drafts had like it could have been easily like a 6-hour long film if they had wanted it to be. So I'm wondering if some of the editing process was just, we filmed a lot of stuff and we had to chop it down a lot, and maybe that's where we get some of the weird cuts that we see in the film. So Chris, I don't know if you had read anything about that or knew to speak to that or not.
As far as like how they approach the adaptation, no, I don't have a lot of insight to offer there, unfortunately. I do know, like, again, kind of typical of the time, like some of that like swift resolution, like you see some pretty stark like time jumps. Like it feels like almost like the opening 2.5 hours of this is like a very stretched out version of a short period of time, where like the rest of this kind of like narrows into like it's the great analogy that Virginia Woolf used for To the Lighthouse, where it's like two longer sections connected by this like hallway. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that, but not to go too far off the rails, but that's what it feels like a little bit. Like we get this like long stretch like of like a short period of time, and then like time flies for a while, and then things kind of come quickly to a head. So probably just a stylistic choice, or it really could have just been like, fuck, we have to wrap it up. I don't know how much footage they shot on this, probably quite a bit. Like I don't know like where the script would have ended up, but it does kind of strike me as like, maybe like more of a stylistic choice at the time, where the resolution wasn't as important as like everything that kind of comes behind. So let's give you your story beats quickly. Scarlett doesn't love Ashley. She loves Rhett. Rhett doesn't give a fuck. And scene.
And scene.
Yeah. I got to give a shout out to the score. Like the music in this movie is brilliant. Like the main theme in particular is like it's legendary, and I think it's used to great effect, both in sort of like the opening and like some of those key scenes where it is like Terra and just like this big sweeping vista. Really like that stuff. So
yeah, it's true. Although, man, it was, I feel like it was so heavy-handed with some of that, like, I guess the glory of what the South used to be, and that it would never come again, and just some of the language that they used when starting this film out, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is, whew, that's a hard one to go with to start out on, but
it reminds me of a line from Succession where a character says, wow, different times, better times, not for all. Is what it reminded me of.
I also think it's interesting that this film like is so problematically nostalgic, like on its surface, but almost all the characters that, I mean, a few of them die, but the other characters end up in like generally much better circumstances financially. Like,
yeah. Again, we're gonna call that like, not that it makes it okay, but symptoms of the time. You got to think like this would have been like, so 39 like would have been like what, 70 years like post Civil War, so there would have been people alive presumably like who kind of grew up adjacent to that. In
definitely
fact,
people who grew up in Reconstruction for sure.
Yeah. And like I read a quote from Hattie McDaniel that said it was a very easy role because her, like, I think grandmother or maybe perhaps her mom like worked in a household very similar to this. So she's like, I was very familiar with like sort of the dynamics, and not that that's necessarily a happy thing, but I guess she was easily able to channel some of those like memories and sort of experiences. And Mammy is maybe my favorite character in the whole movie. Like anytime she's like muttering under her breath and like just like giving somebody what for was definitely a highlight.
I think in terms of the only other thing for cinematography that I could think of was just I had read this fact about how they had when they set up the burning for Atlanta, that it was where they had used like 20 old movie sets that they basically just doused and lit on fire to film.
Whoa.
Okay.
And it was actually, was it Selznick? That was the guy's name. So yeah, the producer of the film, he was the one who apparently doused all the old sets in his studio's lot with kerosene before torching it to do for the painted scene of Civil War Atlanta, and that the set from the 1933 King Kong film was actually burned in the blaze.
No.
So if
Oh,
we're
that's
yeah,
sad.
it's shisty Hollywood. Which I guess in terms of like thinking about other items that have become issues today versus back then, you want to talk about like difference in pay for actors, that it's become like a widely popular, not popular, I should say, but like very topical discussion, is that, you know, back in the day, Clark Gable made like 120 mil, or not mil, I'm sorry, 120,000 off of that, and that Vivian Lee made like 25,000, and she's
Not surprised.
put way more effort into that film than he did. I mean, granted, I mean, yeah,
Significantly more screen time for sure.
sure.
Yeah.
So just that to kind of put it into perspective on how, yeah, both during the filming of and also about the subject matter, things were not always great for everybody. Well, I think the only other question that I've got left before we can wrap up with any other thoughts, I've got two, which you guys can choose from. One is either because I found myself wondering this question when I watched the end of the film, and sort of mirrored from what Scarlett's asking, because there's a part where she breaks down after Rhett leaves and she's like asking herself like, what was it all for? And you know, where she's, and then for her it was the idea of Tara, like that's what really matters, and that's, you know, what all the whole struggle's been about, is keeping hold of her land, and that'll always be there for her, like her dad used to tell her. And so I'm thinking, is that really what this film was about? You know, and so that that to me would be my one question for you. Or if you would prefer instead, I would love to hear what you thought was the cringiest part of this film. So either or, feel free, or both. And Chris, I'll toss it over to you first.
Oh damn, I have to pick between those two things. I suppose
Yep.
I could try to be like rapid fire. No, I think Tara
Pitstorm.
is yeah. I think so. My quick response is I think Tara is like this, like it's like symbolic sort of safe place for her, where she's sort of able to come back to anytime her life is in the toilet for one reason or the other. So I think as May said earlier, like she's told herself that like, as long as I have this, like everything's gonna be okay. So it's more of a defense mechanism, safety net sort of symbol for her that represents the good old days, you know, and like that there's always, you know, we'll always have Tara, I guess, to quote a different movie in a different way. The cringiest moment's so fucking hard, man.
There's too
I
many.
definitely picked up on the subtle KKK stuff, and so perhaps that is like, so the political meeting, I'm assuming, is probably in the book what that was supposed to be all about. And I think that's probably the most visceral reaction that I maybe had, just given that like she's got people that she knows that are like in that camp that like try to help her and things like that, and the fact that a whole bunch of people are going to suffer violently at the hands of, you know, this mob because of like a couple of people that out of probably desperation like are trying to steal her horse. I'm sure that's not, if I had long enough to think, but like that's just one that hasn't come up, so I'll go ahead and bring that up as sort of being one that I was just like, oof. And like, and in the context of the film, that thing that makes it uncomfortable is that I'm sure contemporary audiences were probably rooting for that outcome and going like, good for them, you know, and those damn Yankees, like, you know, who like are trying to like stop them from taking justice, you know, into their hands. So that'll just be my pick. So.
That's a good pick. I think I remember reading, and I could be wrong, but I think I remember reading that the shanty town that they're going against in the book was actually supposed to be like a group of African Americans and not the white folks that you see depicted in the film.
That's what I picked up
So
on. Yeah,
I would say that probably the KKK influence that was in the book was also in that scene, just conveniently removed for the sake of the Hollywood production. So I agree with you in that. I think it's an excellent choice. How about you, May? Thoughts on the meaning behind Gone with the Wind, and also the cringiest of the cringy moments of this this whole train wreck.
Yeah, I mean, it's a film that's trying to do way too much, so it's hard to say what the meaning is because it's like you have three distinct movies like layered in here. Stay away from Scarlett O'Hara. Like I think that's
Your money's gonna be gone with the wind if you get near
Yeah.
this trifling.
That seems like the main moral. I agree exactly with what Chris said about Tara being just kind of like a nod to the quote unquote good old days more than anything else. And as for cringiest moment, if we're going like pure cringe, not just like bad, but just cringe, I gotta say it's when she shows up to like once again throw herself at Ashley as in his like office wearing just like what I imagine is probably like the sluttiest dress that you could find in that era. Like she went to town on that outfit. Looked great, but it was a lot for showing up at your like I guess technically he worked under her like employee's office. And yeah, so that whole moment was just extremely cringe for me.
Give it up already.
Nice.
You've had plenty of tries. It's not,
Right?
it's not gonna happen.
She's like, but look at my dress. What about in this dress?
Oh man, awesome.
Then you, good
Well,
sir. Like,
I gotta go
hear
for
yours.
my cringiest is dark. It's so it would truthfully was a toss up between the implied rape, but also the part where he is drunk and he puts his hands around her head and he whispers about, you see these hands, and I'm just like, the only reason that she is not physically abused in this film is because this is Gone with the Wind as a movie. But I was like, there is so much that I feel like would have happened that was not shown in this film that would have made more sense for that character in that moment. And that was what sort of terrified me, was that I'm like, this is supposed to be a love story and this is clearly not what I came in here for. And watching this like spousal abuse depicted on screen and being like, not necessarily normalizing it or saying it was okay, but just sort of like, I don't know, just depicting it like that. I just thought, oh man, that just really, after having been told that this was like an epic romance, and just watching this and I'm like, this is not okay. Like, and I was really legitimately terrified for her character in that moment, because I mean, she had fallen down a flight of stairs, and I'm like, clearly they're not shying away from violence to some degree for characters, and he has shown that he can be violent in kicking down a door and throwing things and losing his temper when he's intoxicated. And so I was just like, what is going to happen? And that to me was, oh man, that I got really cringed out by that. So
I feel like that was more terrifying than cringe.
okay.
Not to argue against your pick, but
Yeah, that's valid. My definition of the word is it's perfectly fine to question the definition of my question. Please reword your question, please, sir.
Well, I interpret cringe as like intense secondhand embarrassment.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just thought anything that made me cringe. That's how I interpreted it.
Yeah,
that's why I was like, I'm having a real hard time here. Well,
fair.
Well, if we're going with that, and just in terms of like poor decision for social occasions, that's a hard one. Probably even the red dress. I mean,
yeah.
To show up to, after going into it knowing that was probably what you were going to get punished for, giving off the impression you were having an affair with the guy whose birthday party you're going to, and basically just dressing up, following Rhett's argument about you should wear this and dressing up in that. That was like, yep, good. And all the looks that all the ladies had as soon as she walked in, and I was just like, I'm ready. All right, here we go. And Melanie diffused it. So that's probably, I'd have to go with that. As to, oh yeah, thank you. As to what I think the film is really about, I mean, I guess, I don't know. I went a little bit more like on the the weird tangential thought, no surprise there, of like just looking at it is like the argument between what's more important, is it strength or is it heart? Because they talked about how Melanie was, or at least Rhett makes some offhand comment about Melanie always, when she's about to die, about how she's like, she never really had a lot of strength, but she had a lot of heart. And I'm like, I mean, yeah, maybe, but I don't know. She was like one of the strongest characters not to like lose her cool and act inappropriately that were shown in the film. And I just think it's interesting how a lot of the people that say that they like Scarlett O'Hara, it's because of her strength. It's because she doesn't give up and quit. She gets knocked down and she's like, screw it. Tomorrow's another day. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to get what I want. I may not like what I want, and it may not be really what I want, but I'm going to get what I think I want. And so it's like there's that strength of she's not going to just lay down and die when her house gets burned down during the Civil War. She's not just going to lay down and lose like lose herself by whether her husbands plural have passed away. She's always motivated to do something, and so I guess in some respect there is strength of character in that regard, but also just the importance of like even just having a moment to have like the heart to like help other people. Even if you've been a crappy person, there's still moments where Rhett says something that is technically true and is nice, or there's moments where he cares about his kid. Arguably, he does say that he cares about his kid because it's the one thing that he can own or control, like own completely.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, there's the guy and the money again, kind of a thing. But he does care about his kid. He does want the best for his child. And so there's moments where characters do show compassion to some degree. And I think that that's important too. So it's sort of like, even in the face of all this terrible tragedy that happened during the Civil War and afterwards, and people just trying to get by, that you still have a lot of heart and strength to try and get through it. Even if some of the hardship that you experience is your own making, because you just can't figure yourself out. And you have a lot of weird feelings that you have to process. So, but yeah, I think that's where I'm coming away from on that. I mean, granted, the indigenous population before settlers came in probably would have said they liked the land too, and we can see where that turned out. So, I mean, maybe don't take your dad's word on that, Scarlett, but it's cool.
I'd love to briefly share the one moment that genuinely like made me giggle and like I enjoyed. When the guys are coming back from that terrible quote unquote meeting, and the excuse is given that, oh no, they were at Belle Watling's. The doctor's wife's reaction is not anger, but to be like, oh, does she really have all these mirrors and gold?
Yeah.
Like I love her.
Yep. All right, Sarah, then I will turn it back over to you, and thank you guys for thank you for joining me on this exciting adventure through one of Hollywood's classic films.
There's a cultural education.
I think it's a good pick because to have this conversation, it's interesting. That's one of the beauties about the medium, is how, as society evolves, right, your perceptions of things are going to change, right, and societal attitudes towards it's going to change. Like, I'm glad this movie exists and is available to be talked about, but sure ain't the same as it was when it came out, I'm sure, as far as attitudes towards it, and that's probably a good thing. So well, I have prepared a little game for you all called Keyword Countdown. More specifically, a round of Keyword Countdown, which is a game created by Mr. Gavin Murphy of RKG. They are kind enough to let us play this on occasion on the podcast. Their latest project is a playthrough of all the Resident Evil 7 DLC. It's called Back with the Bakers, and it's done in a grindhouse style, like with like trailers and like the artwork and stuff. It's just fabulous, and as always, it made me laugh my ass off for a good week as I watched through the episode, so you should check that out. But I have prepared 5 films for you, up to 10 clues apiece. Going to read these one at a time. These are pulled straight from IMDb's plot keywords. You are going to try to guess the film based on the clues. The earlier you guess it, the more points you get. Any questions?
I'm ready. It's been a while since we did this.
Alrighty. There is a theme to these films. The sooner you discover that, the better your chances at getting subsequent ones. So film number one, clue number one. And for time's sake, I'll probably not rapid fire through these, but I'll move a little briskly. So your first clue is art studio. Art studio.
The Princess Diaries.
Not a bad guess, but not the one. All right. Clue number two, infidelity.
Oh,
Infidelity.
I have no idea if this is correct because I actually haven't seen it yet, but Marriage Story?
Not a bad guess. I have not seen that either, but it's not the one.
I am so blanking right now. This is bad.
Okay, they get less obscure as you know as we go on.
Yep.
Clue number three, family relationships.
Really narrows it down.
Clue number four, catchy song. Catchy song. All right, clue number five, all-star cast. All-star cast. All
Dirty
right.
Dancing.
Not a bad guess, but nope. Clue number six, first love. First love.
I feel like I'm gonna kick myself as soon as you say what the answer is.
All right. Clue number seven, language learning. Language learning. Learning
Her?
a language is what I would say. Is a bit kind of rephrase that. It's not her.
I took that to mean like language networks.
Yeah. All right. I feel like someone might get it on this one. Clue number eight, British Prime Minister.
Oh, is this Love Actually?
It is indeed Love.
Are these going to be Christmas movies?
I don't know. We'll have to see.
Okay, it's Christmas movies.
That's 3 points for Mr. Rotondi. Well done. Fresh set of clues. Oh, so the remaining clues, as we like to do, aging rock star and Christmas.
Nice.
New set of clues, new film. Film number two. First clue, Chicago, Illinois.
Chicago.
Not a bad guess, given the clue.
Home Alone.
Blues Brothers.
It is Home Alone with a 10 points. It is May coming in with 10 points.
Noise.
Wow.
Awesome.
Your subsequent clues would have been impersonating a police officer, breaking the fourth wall, TV dinner, alarm clock, videotape, child's point of view, airport, home invasion, booby trap. So nice job getting it on Chicago, Illinois. 10 points for May. Will's got 3. All right. New film, new set of clues. Clue number one, childhood memory. Childhood memory. Okay. Don't mind the cat. That's not a clue, by the way. That's just my cat in the frame. Clue number two, 1940s. 1940s.
It's a Wonderful Life.
Not a bad guess, but that's not it. It's not the one. Clue number three, cult film. Cult film. As in it's like a cult classic, not a film about cults. Not to be confused. Clue number 4, bully.
This is not a Christmas Story, is it?
Is that your guess?
It's gonna be my guess.
It is A Christmas Story.
Nice.
So that is 1,
Shoot
2,
your eye
3,
out,
4,
kid.
5, 6, 7.
job.
7 points for Will.
I gotta know what the other clues
Overtime.
were.
Yes,
Yeah.
the other clues were sticking out one's tongue, brother-brother relationship, mouth washed with soap, small town, secret decoder ring, and BB gun.
Yeah.
Nice.
All right.
can't
I
stand
believe that
film,
is
but they are
10
always
10
Oh,
for
go ahead,
all
I'm
right now.
sorry.
So we are tied 10 for all. So that is got 2 more films to go. We'll see. It's all to play for everybody.
All right, let's go, Rotondi.
First clue. Animated title sequence.
I'm just gonna throw stuff out there. Elf.
Nope. Clue number 2, chainsaw. I love the change in expression that both of you just had.
The Santa Claus?
It's not the one. Not a bad guess. Clue number 3, road rage.
Fargo's not a Christmas movie, is it?
No, God. I don't even think you can make the Die Hard argument there. Clue number 4, panties. All right. Clue number 5, squirrel.
Is this one of the like hundreds of Hallmark movies? If so, I don't think that's fair.
No, definitely not. Wouldn't do that to you. Clue number 6, SWAT team.
Chainsaw, SWAT team, squirrel, animated title.
I'm really blinking here.
There's somewhere out there, there's a listener shouting it out, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Clue number 7, staple gun. Staple gun.
Home Alone 2?
It's a good guess, but it's not the one.
3?
Nope. Clue number 8, next door neighbor.
I feel like I definitely should know this.
Yeah, I feel like I'm gonna hate myself when we.
Clue number 9, Christmas bonus. Christmas bonus. Maybe you haven't seen this. Interesting. This next one will definitely give it away. Clue number 10, final clue. National Lampoon film series.
Oh, Christmas Vacation? Yeah.
It's Christmas Vacation.
Oh my gosh. I haven't seen that in forever, man. Oh my god.
That's an annual watch for us.
I've never seen it.
It's very stupid.
I need to, clearly.
It's very, very stupid, but yeah, it's worth a watch. So that puts Will up by 1 point. So it is still
yeah
anybody's game here. So
I'm just glad I made it on the board. So
you're doing well.
Yeah.
11 points for Will and 10 points for May. All right.
You've gotten more
Final
of these than
film.
I have. So
it's all right, Finch. You're gonna close it now. This is
you
it.
got the 10-pointer though. That's big. Final film, first clue, magic.
Harry Potter.
Not a bad guess, but nope.
The Santa Claus.
Not a bad guess, but no. Second clue is friendship. Friendship. All right. Clue number 3.
Charlie Brown Christmas Special.
Not a bad guess, but it is not that. Clue number 3 is hot chocolate.
Are you sure it's not the Santa Claus?
Are you sure it's not Elf? Is this Elf now?
It's not. Good guesses though. All right. Clue number 4 is motion capture.
Oh, wait. Oh God, what's the name of the little reindeer, the little Rudolph one? Oh man, I don't remember it. I don't know the name.
Is it Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer?
It's not.
Is it the little animated one with the abominable snowman and Rudolph? Whatever that's called.
No,
it's not that one. Okay.
No.
I want it to be.
I know.
So not stop motion, but motion capture, just so you're not going down the
whoops.
Nightmare Before Christmas?
That's stop motion.
No, you just clarified. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't want you going down like the wrong.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm interceding a little bit there.
Okay.
Clue number 5 is waiter. Waiter. I haven't seen this movie in a while. I feel like I should watch it. I remember it being very good. Clue number 6, snowing. Right, we're getting into the obvious territory here now. Clue number 7, Christmas gift.
Was bedknobs and broomsticks like Christmas adjacent?
It's a Wonderful Life. I'm just throwing that out there again. Okay.
That's a good one. That a clue that I would almost pick for this would have worked for that one as well. Clue number 8, based on a children's book.
Can you recap the clues too?
Yeah, so far we have magic, friendship, hot chocolate, motion capture, waiter, snowing, Christmas gift. Most recent is based on a children's book. All right. Penultimate clue, North Pole.
The Polar Express.
Yeah. And with that, May comes out and
and
wins it. Good job.
By like 1 point, I think, right?
By 1 point. Yeah. Well
Well
done. 12 to
awesome.
11.
Good game.
May taking the lead there. Good job. Final clue, famous locomotive would have been. So
Yeah. Oh, that was a tough
Awesome.
one.
Yeah.
well done.
The animation in that is so uncanny. Like, I hated it as a
Mhm.
kid.
It's because they did the performance capture stuff where they like scanned in their faces and all
Yeah.
that good stuff. But
So I think
yeah.
I like blocked it from my mind.
Yeah.
I remember thinking that was brilliant back in the day, but I haven't seen it in a long time. So maybe I'll throw that in. And this is the perfect transition or segue, because for the rest of the month, we are each going to nominate a Christmas film and watch it and discuss it on the podcast however we wish. We're going to keep it nice and light and chill. We'll resume our regular drawing after the new year. Mr. Rotani won a lottery, so to speak, and he will be going first. So, Will Rotandi, what is the Christmas film you've nominated? And just in like 30 seconds or less, why?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, I am happy to be to have volunteered as tribute for this one. And I will have to say that the film I choose for Christmas is Die Hard because
Yes.
it is if it's not the ultimate Christmas film, it is definitely the ultimate Christmas adjacent film. And I just love it. It's so entertaining. It's definitely a yearly thing for me. And it's just not, I mean, I don't know, for a lot of people it's not the go-to thing, and I respect that. You know, there's, for anybody who loves like the Wonderful Life, It's a Wonderful Life, or Polar Express, you know, Harry Potter even, you know, that's perfectly fine. But for me it's John McClane, so that's my
Yes,
go-to
there's
pick.
debate whether or not it even is a Christmas film. I think that it is.
It's the
I come
official
down.
stance of this podcast now if we're treating it as a Christmas film.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's right. This be a first time, May, or have you been blessed with seeing Die Hard before?
It'll be a first entire watch. I've definitely seen
okay.
clips, but yeah.
Yes.
Awesome.
Fantastic. Well, that is going to be our next film. So if you're following along, watching along, go ahead and fire up Die Hard to get into the season spirit. And next week's episode, we'll talk about it in any way that Mr. Rotandi wishes. Should be a good time. And then subsequent episodes, May and I will put forth our nominations, and same thing until the end of the year. So you'll get an episode for each week throughout the remainder of the year. I suspect we'll announce it, like take a small hiatus like right after the new year so we can kind of reset. But who knows? But until next week, we love you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.